people still like egg creams and still consume egg creams because I think it's obviously the nostalgia factor. They're trying to reach into the past through this food to, connect with their ancestors. It's an interesting thing, but, to me, as I've said in my writings about egg creams, I don't think it's like the greatest soda fountain drink.
It couldn't possibly be.
For me, it's the Lime Ricky. I'm a big lover of Lime Rickies.
Sure.
And if you want to go, rich and upscale, then of course it's an ice cream soda.
Welcome to 18 Jewish Foods, Culture and History in kosher bite-sized portions. This podcast tells the stories of iconic Jewish dishes, shedding light on the people who eat them. Here's your host, Joel Haber.
Many have said it before, but it still must be said that there are no eggs and no cream in an egg cream. What there is in an egg cream are a lot of fond memories for a lot of Jews, particularly those from New York City. But what is an egg cream? It's a cold drink invented in New York City at soda fountain, candy store type places back in the early part of the 20th century or the late part of the 19th century. What it contains is a mixture of milk, chocolate syrup, and seltzer. And it's kind of like a chocolate milk soda, if you will. That much almost everyone agrees on, but they agree on almost nothing else about the egg cream. Who invented it and when, the sequence in which the ingredients are added to the glass, and most importantly, why is it called an egg cream if it contains neither of those ingredients? Since there seems no real way to answer the questions, and the competing answers all might have some truth to them, I'm not even going to go into rehashing them. You can find them easily via Google search, and I'll link to some of the best sources in this podcast's episode notes. Rather, I'll discuss what is certain. The egg cream began on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the early 20th or late 19th century. It is a Jewish drink that originated in candy stores and luncheonettes, and when the Jews from that area moved to the outer boroughs, Brooklyn, the Bronx, etc., it goes with them, where it enjoys a big boom in popularity, particularly post-World War II. Jews were heavily involved in the seltzer business in New York City, and that may be one of the things that helped make this a Jewish drink. Plus, seltzer was inexpensive on its own, but for just a drop more money, you could feel like you're having a much more luxurious drink. And it was still way less expensive than drinks that were made with ice cream and the like. This also helped it gain popularity among less wealthy immigrants, such as the Jews. What else is certain is that you can't properly make an egg cream with pre-bottled seltzer. The seltzer needs to come from a spritzer siphon bottle or old-fashioned hand-jerked soda fountains. Otherwise, you won't get the proper foam on top. And yes, you do get some from stirring it vigorously, but if it's filled right, you don't need to do much stirring, actually. But one of the other funny things about the egg cream are the rules that people have. People say that if it's not made using Fox's You Bet chocolate syrup, it's not really an egg cream. But oddly, the egg cream seems to have been invented before the syrup, or certainly, even if it wasn't invented before it, many early versions used other syrups. Were they not egg creams back then? Other people argue about the order that you put the ingredients in, and if not, then it's also not really an egg cream. And I think what these rules, if you will, highlight is that the drink holds a lot more significance for its nostalgia value than for its taste itself. And so people's rules of the exact way that you have to make it are a way of holding on to that memory of the ones that they drank decades ago. If theirs was the authentic one, then it gives more value to their nostalgia. And the proof of this is that if you ask people about egg creams, typically, they'll begin to immediately gush about all of these details, but almost none of them ever mention its taste. Sure, it was tasty, but it wasn't necessarily the greatest tasting drink you could possibly have. And you had to drink it fairly quickly or the foam would dissipate on top. Even back then, it seems like it was more of an affordable pleasure than anything super incredible. In preparing this episode, I asked my mom and dad about their egg cream memories. And first of all, it was only then that I found out that during summers in college, my dad actually worked at a luncheonette where he used to make egg creams, the same luncheonette that he used to buy them at when he was a child. He spoke about them before, but I don't think I ever heard him tell me that he actually made egg creams in the past. As he recalled his memories, he gave me specific details on how he would make the egg cream. But when I asked him how they tasted, his response was not much more than just very sweet. My mom's memories were triggered into telling me the layout of candy stores where she'd get egg creams at and the specific type of glass that it came in. And this kind of is my main point here. It may not have been the greatest drink ever, but it was ours. It was Jewish. Back in episode 14, I spoke about genuinely Jewish alcoholic beverages, such as machia. But the fact is that we've also had plenty of genuinely Jewish beverages that didn't contain any alcohol. And the egg cream is a big one. To look a bit more at the egg cream's place in American Jewish culture, I spoke with Andrew Coe. Andrew is an independent scholar and a writer who examines food history. He's written a number of books on his own, as well as one that he co-authored, a James Beard Award winner with his wife, Jane Ziegelman. But I wanted to speak to him about egg creams since he wrote a really interesting article on a related footnote to the egg cream and was also featured in a short documentary film on the topic.
I grew up in the suburbs, therefore I don't really have a personal direct connection with egg creams. I got it mainly from hearing my parents talk about it, who grew up in Brooklyn and the Bronx. You've written about egg creams. You've been in the documentary about egg creams. What's your connection to the egg cream?
I've lived in New York City for, 45 years or something like that. And I'm a food historian. And I love exploring New York's food, its food currently, and it's the history of its food, and particularly immigrant food. And so egg creams are one of the sort of the Jewish immigrants who came in the late 19th century and their descendants. The egg creams are one of the iconic drinks of that portion of New York culture. And so I had to write about it.
So would you say that you came to it only from your academic interest, or did you grow up having it, or did your parents talk about it, or anything of that nature?
Well, I grew up outside New York in New Haven, Connecticut, and there wasn't much of it. It was not an egg cream town.
Right. I grew up in New Jersey, so same thing, yeah.
Right. But then, I moved to New York in the early 1980s when things were a little bit rough. In New York, but it was also really fun to explore the Lower East Side and the East Village, where some of the last egg cream purveyors like Gem Spa were still slinging their egg creams. And, I was hanging out in the East Village a lot. And that was the thing to do, was to go to Gem Spa and have an egg cream. That was like the cool thing that showed that you were sort of a hip insider. So obviously I was there.
That was like a moment of like sort of a short rebirth of the popularity, correct?
Yes.
So can you tell me a little bit broadly about the place of the egg cream in early 20th century New York City culture?
Well, more broadly, the egg creams are a part of soda fountain culture. Back in the late 19th, early 20th century, soda fountains were huge. That was like a really important part of American culture. So egg creams grew out of soda fountains.
Some have pointed to the fact not only of the soda fountain aspect, but also the fact that the egg cream was sort of an inexpensive replacement for something like an ice cream soda or something more expensive. There were lots of poor immigrants in the city. How did it happen that it became a Jewish beverage specifically?
Well, I think it became a Jewish beverage because the soda fountain industry was a very easy industry for Jewish immigrants to get into because it didn't cost as much money. The overhead was low. I mean, basically, the most basic thing for soda fountains is you need seltzer and you need syrups. And it was quite easy to start a little business, maybe as a pushcart operator selling soda fountain drinks. And then you could, and then it just went on from there. Then you would, eventually, hopefully have enough money to open a storefront. All immigrants at that time were really interested in becoming Americans. And so this was what Americans, this is one of the things that Americans did. They had a soda fountain drink, and the Jewish immigrants wanted to join in that.
So that's also kind of the question. I mean, Jews were prominent in seltzer industry, in the syrup industry, but again, we were not the only immigrants. So was there something about those jobs that particularly attracted Jews as opposed to Irish immigrants or Italian immigrants or German immigrants? Well, the Germans were already a little bit earlier, but all of those others that came at the same time that were more or less at an equal economic level.
Well, I think one of the things that happened is that, as you mentioned, German immigrants. So the German immigrants started really coming in the mid-19th century, and among them were German Jews. And the Germans and the German Jews were very, very heavily into the seltzer water business. And, as they prospered and moved out of the old neighborhoods on the Lower East Side, Eastern Europeans, Jews came in, and they kind of inherited those businesses. They saw that the German Jews were doing really well in this, and there was like a kind of following, a chain of businesses.
So that's interesting. If I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that like Eastern European Jews that came at the same time as, say, Italians and Irish, they had the connection to the German Jews, whereas the Irish and the Italians didn't have that prior generation to tap into.
Right. The Italian immigration really started in 1880, and most of the Italians were poor immigrants, peasants, essentially, from southern Italy, and worked as like low-level laborers. And the Irish, who arrived, a bit before that, particularly after the potato famine, were interested in other businesses. So they didn't particularly go into the seltzer water industry.
Got it. So you wrote a well-known piece about a mobster who went into the flavored syrup racket, a Jewish mobster on the Lower East Side. And when we think about like mob rackets, we're thinking about things like construction and waste management and stuff like that, not, sugar syrups. What do you think that the fact that somebody went into this and created this racket actually says about the New York City culture of that time specifically?
Well, in one word, the New York City culture, the political and economic culture, was corrupt. From the beat cops on the street all the way up through prosecutors and judges. There was corruption everywhere, and people were willing to look the other way if they could get a little graft, if they could get a little payoff.
We're talking about the 1920s and 30s, correct?
Yes. So you had prohibition, you had all kinds of criminal things. But if you wanted to be an entry-level racketeer, like you were a Jewish immigrant or a child of immigrants, then you went into like a smaller business, which hadn't been taken over by the big guys. And so, I mean, there was a lot of criminality in the bread business and in fresh produce and kosher chickens. But one guy found opportunity in the soda fountain syrup business. A guy named Harry Solomon Dolowich.
So Harry basically, maybe he made some money in the short time he was involved, but he never became like a big time gangster. He was trying to get there, and things ended before he ever had the opportunity.
Yeah, well, it looked like the Manhattan prosecutor, which was where he was based, would crack down on him, but apparently money changed hands. But then a prosecutor up in the Bronx heard about this, and for there, things went down really quickly.
So the story of the egg cream coming maybe full circle in that not only is it the thing that helps the drinkers to become American and the salespeople to become American, but even the gangsters.
Yes. There's a lot of opportunity there.
Awesome. Anything else you want to tell me about egg creams that I haven't brought up?
I mean, I think that people still like egg creams and still consume egg creams because I think it's obviously the nostalgia factor. They're trying to reach into the past through this food to, connect with their ancestors. It's an interesting thing, but, to me, as I've said in my writings about egg creams, I don't think it's like the greatest soda fountain drink.
It couldn't possibly be.
For me, it's the Lime Ricky. I'm a big lover of Lime Rickies.
Sure.
And if you want to go, rich and upscale, then of course it's an ice cream soda.
I do want to mention at least a few other Jewish beverages that don't contain alcohol. While seltzer itself was not uniquely Jewish or invented by Jews, it was very much associated with us. We were one of the main purveyors and popularized it in America. But beyond seltzer, celery soda is definitely ours. Dr. Brown's, the brand that is associated with celery soda, was a very early flavored soda. And oddly, it was made with celery seeds. It has a peculiar taste. It came out at least 15 years before Coca-Cola ever came out. So it's one of the earliest flavored sodas. I won't say it's definitely the earliest, but it's one of the earliest flavored sodas. And for most of its history, it was only sold in restaurants, especially the Jewish deli. And so it became associated with that Jewish food, and by association became a Jewish food in itself. Originally, it was sold as semi-medicinal, and it was called a tonic rather than a soda. And also on the semi-medicinal level, there's another Jewish beverage that is called gogol-mogol. It's a Russian Jewish home remedy for colds or sore throats, and it's made from raw egg yolk and honey. There are many variations and options of other things that people add in, but that's the basic recipe of it. There were many popular beverages, by the way, among Jews in the Sephardic and Mizrahi worlds, but I have not come across any uniquely Jewish ones. But the ones I've listed here, though all Ashkenazi, all seem to be genuinely Jewish, non-alcoholic beverages. So, with this, I have reached the 18th Jewish food. And I still have one final episode of this podcast where I'm going to wrap everything up and discuss where things will be going for me from here. But I hope that you'll join me for the final episode in 2 more weeks. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Got any questions or comments? Please feel free to email me at jewishfoodbook@gmail.com. Please listen, like, and follow wherever you get your podcasts, and I would truly appreciate it if you'd share this with other Jewish food lovers. The theme music you hear is Adir Hu Revisited by Rebbe Soul. Check him out wherever you stream music. And as always, until next time, I wish you B'tei Avon.